I got home later than planned that Friday. Flight delays out of St. Louis had me circling over Atlanta for the better part of an hour, and by the time I stepped inside our house, it was nearly 9:30. The lights in the hallway were dimmed, casting that warm, amber glow Lauren liked. She'd always said it made the place feel more like a home and less like a showroom. That was her style, refined, thoughtful, always curated. I dropped my duffel by the door and took a breath. Something felt off the moment I crossed the threshold. I couldn't quite place it at first, maybe the way the air sat heavier than usual or how quiet it was. Not the relaxed kind of quiet like when we'd sit in the den reading on rainy Sundays. No, this was a cautious silence. It felt like I had just walked into a conversation that had ended too abruptly. I headed into the kitchen and stopped in my tracks. A single wine glass sat near the sink, still half full with deep red liquid. Merlot from the looks of it. Lauren never left wine out. She was meticulous about cleanup, always rinsing her glass immediately after she drank. I stared at it for a beat longer than I probably should have, waiting for my brain to stop trying to rationalize it. Then I saw it just beneath the windowsill, something shiny. I walked over, crouched slightly, and picked it up. A cufflink. Silver, polished, with a black onyx stone in the center. I turned it over in my hand, checking for initials or a brand. Nothing. But I knew one thing immediately: it wasn't mine. I only owned 2 pairs, both gold. One from my father. One from Lauren for our anniversary. I hadn't worn either in weeks. I stood there for a while, turning the cufflink slowly in my hand until I heard the water shut off in the bathroom down the hall. Moments later, Lauren appeared, wrapped in her cream-colored robe, her face slick with a seaweed mask. She looked surprised, not shocked, just a touch too surprised, like she'd practiced it in her head. "Oh," she said. "You're home early." "Flight delay cleared up," I said, watching her carefully. Her eyes flicked to the cufflink in my hand, and for just a second, not more, something shifted in her expression. A micro-freeze. Then she smiled and walked into the kitchen like everything was fine. "That belongs to Daniel," she said, opening the fridge casually. "You know, the assistant from the development office across the street. He stopped by earlier to drop off some closing docs for the Mitchell project. Guess he lost it when he leaned against the windowsill." She poured herself a second glass of wine. "I noticed she didn't offer me one." "Didn't know he wore cufflinks," I said. She shrugged. "Maybe it's a thing for him. He dresses up more than the rest of them, you know? Kind of a metro vibe. Very polished." There was an ease in her tone, but she wasn't looking at me. She kept fiddling with the bottle, then moved to the speaker system and tapped her phone. Music flooded the space, soft jazz, a track I recognized from one of her dinner playlists. She turned the volume up just a notch too loud for conversation. Then she looked at me and smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was going to order Thai. Still want that lemongrass chicken you like?" I nodded, mostly to avoid escalating whatever this was. She ordered dinner, barely looked at me as she did, and then disappeared down the hall again, saying she needed to rinse her mask before it dried out her skin. 20 minutes later, she emerged freshly washed, towel-drying her hair, and claimed she had a headache. Said she was turning in early and kissed me on the cheek, light, detached, before disappearing into the bedroom. I sat alone in the kitchen while the takeout cooled in its containers. The music still played softly, and I turned the cufflink over again in my palm. Something about the weight of it felt heavier than it should. I kept trying to push the unease down, chalking it up to exhaustion from the trip. But a knot had taken shape in my chest, and no amount of logic could untie it. What got me wasn't just the cufflink or the wine. It was the details, too many little things that didn't quite align. Lauren never turned on music randomly, especially not when we were about to eat. And Daniel? I'd seen him a few times. He wore sneakers and button-ups, always slightly wrinkled. He didn't strike me as the cufflink type. Then there was the way she had looked at me, or rather, how she hadn't. Avoidance. That subtle, sharp shift in energy that happens when someone you know too well becomes a stranger in the span of seconds. It was all too controlled. Like she had run through the scenario in her head already. I finished dinner by myself and cleaned up. Lauren was already asleep or pretending to be by the time I got to the bedroom. She had turned away from my side of the bed, breathing slow and even. I lay down beside her, arms folded behind my head, the cufflink resting on the nightstand like a little sentinel keeping watch over the cracks forming in my trust. I didn't sleep much that night. My thoughts kept circling the same drain. Why would she lie if it was a lie? And if it wasn't, why did it feel like one? Sometimes it's not about what's said, it's about the spaces between the words. The eye contact not made. The overly rehearsed tone. The wine glass left as if forgotten by accident, but maybe not. I didn't want to be that guy, paranoid, jealous, spinning stories out of nothing. But the stories don't come from nowhere. They come from the smallest fractures. The details that don't quite make sense. And that cufflink, that single, silent, out-of-place object felt like the first crack in the glass. I went for a run the next morning. I told myself it was to shake off the travel fatigue, but that wasn't true. I ran because I needed to move to put space between me and the questions bouncing around my skull like bees trapped in a jar. The air was cool for late spring and the streets in our neighborhood were still half asleep, the lawns dew-frosted and quiet. But nothing felt calm inside me. The cufflink hadn't left my thoughts. I'd placed it in the drawer by my side of the bed before slipping under the sheets last night, thinking I could forget about it if I just compartmentalized hard enough. It hadn't worked. The second I closed my eyes, the image of it resting on the windowsill replayed over and over. It had no business being there. No rational explanation stuck, no matter how many versions of the story I ran through in my head. As my feet pounded the pavement, I started to recall the things I hadn't let myself notice or maybe didn't want to notice. That's the thing about hindsight. It hits differently when you finally stop trying to believe the best in someone. The first memory that came back was about 2 months ago. Lauren had started working late. At first, it was just a couple of evenings a week. Deadlines, she had said, her voice light and breezy, as if the pressure was just part of the job. Then it became 3 nights a week. Then 4. And not just working late, full absences, sometimes coming home near midnight with some takeout container half-eaten in her bag and that subtle, perfumed scent lingering on her clothes longer than it should have. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I even joked about it with her once, something dumb like, "Are you having an affair with your inbox?" She had laughed, but it had come too fast, too loud. I remember thinking in that moment that something felt off about her reaction. But I pushed it down. Trust, I thought. That's what makes a marriage strong. But trust without awareness is just ignorance dressed up in hope. Then there was her phone. Lauren used to leave it everywhere, kitchen counters, coffee tables, wedged between the couch cushions. But recently it was always in her hand or face down next to her on the armrest. She had even started taking it with her into the bathroom. Once or twice, I heard it buzz while she was in the shower, and instead of ignoring it, she would rush out dripping wet just to check. She claimed she had to keep on top of work stuff. Except now, her lock screen was different. Password changed. No more fingerprint. I only noticed because I once tried to check the time while my phone was charging. Her screen had gone dark the moment I picked it up. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. IT forced a reset for security, she had said, not even looking up from her laptop. At the time, it sounded reasonable. But now? Now I could feel my stomach turning every time I replayed her words. Then came the memory of that social media post. A story on her Instagram she posted a few weeks ago, a harmless sh*t of a wine glass at a rooftop bar. One of those artsy snaps she liked to take when she went out with coworkers. I had double-tapped it, moved on. But a week later, it disappeared. Not archived, deleted. The detail I hadn't processed back then? The reflection in the glass. It was faint, but there was a shape, a masculine hand holding a phone, the cuff of a white shirt just barely in frame. It didn't look like Lauren's coworker Emma or any of her usual girls' night companions. I'd caught it only for a second, and when I asked her who took the photo, she said she set a timer. Just being artsy, she had smiled. I didn't question it further. Why would I? But now that memory returned like a slap. The kind of slap you don't feel right away but leaves your cheek burning long after. Back at home, I slowed down as I approached our driveway. The house stood still, its brick facade the same as always, but it felt different now. Like it was holding secrets in its walls. Inside, I found Lauren at the kitchen island, still in her robe, her laptop open, and a cup of coffee half-sipped beside her. She looked up and smiled, that effortless kind of smile that had once made me fall for her. It still looked the same. That was the worst part. "Good run?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, wiping sweat off my forehead. "Cleared my head." "Glad to hear it." She turned back to her screen, her fingers moving across the keys. I stood there for a second, watching her. Really watching her. Her nails were perfectly done. Light pink. Fresh. She only got them done when something big was coming up, events, conferences. Not random Saturdays. "Big plans today?" I asked. "No, not really. Just catching up on some emails. Might head to the co-working space later if it gets noisy here." She always preferred working from home. I knew that. She had said so 100 times. Now suddenly she wanted to be out. I nodded slowly. "Sounds good." She glanced up again. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired from the trip." She smiled back, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something unreadable. Her gaze held mine for just a moment too long, then dropped. I went upstairs, showered, and tried to shake it off. But I couldn't. I was stuck in a loop of memory and doubt, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the signs weren't subtle anymore. They were stacking up, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Later that day, I walked past her phone left charging on the counter. She was in the backyard on a Zoom call, pacing slowly with her headphones in. I glanced at the screen, no notifications, no banner previews, nothing. Just a blank lock screen. I thought about trying the passcode, my birthday, our anniversary, her old code. I didn't touch it. Not because I respected her privacy. Not even because I was scared. But because I already knew what I'd find. Doubt is like a leak in your ceiling. It starts small, a single dark stain you tell yourself isn't that bad. But ignore it long enough and it spreads, seeping into everything until the whole roof threatens to collapse. By the time the sun dipped low behind the trees, I had made a decision, not about what to do, but about what not to do. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed clarity. Evidence. The truth, not the filtered, convenient version she might offer if I pressed her, but the unedited reality that came only when someone thought they were safe. That night, as we ate dinner, grilled salmon, asparagus, a bottle of wine she had opened without asking if I wanted any, I smiled and nodded and made small talk. I told her about my trip. She told me about work. The rhythm was the same as always, but the undertone had changed. She had no idea I was watching her differently now. And she had no idea that I had already started seeing the cracks. 1 week later, we drove down to Savannah together. Lauren's company was hosting a private dinner event at one of the upscale hotels downtown. She said it was a networking opportunity, black tie optional, with limited seating and an exclusive guest list. Normally, she'd fly in and out for these events without much fanfare. This time, though, she insisted I come. We could use the time away, she said one morning over coffee. It's just a night. Plus, people have been asking about you. I raised an eyebrow. People at your firm? She gave a small shrug, sipping her tea. Just the usual. You know, curious colleagues, nothing serious. Her voice was smooth, unbothered. But something about her inviting me now, of all times, made me pause. Still, I agreed. I wanted to be there. Not just for appearances, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever truth I was circling around was getting closer. The hotel was beautiful. Polished marble floors, chandeliers that looked like they were stolen from some European opera house, and bellmen in crisp uniforms. We checked into our room, a corner suite Lauren had pre-booked just in case they were overbooked, she'd claimed. Inside, she moved like she belonged there. As if this wasn't her first time in this suite. The event was scheduled for 6:30 p.m. in a ballroom on the lower level. Lauren had her gown zipped and makeup applied before I'd even finished tying my tie. She looked stunning, of course. She always did. But there was a difference now, a kind of practiced perfection that made her feel distant, untouchable. You clean up well, she said as we stood in front of the elevator mirror. So do you, I replied, trying to read her face. Her smile was polished. Professional. Not personal. The dinner began just as expected, soft jazz playing from a corner quartet, white tablecloths, and a dozen conversations overlapping in every direction. I mingled, shook hands, even laughed at small talk I didn't care about. But my eyes never left her for long. Lauren flitted between tables like a butterfly, a quick laugh here, a hand on a shoulder there. Her wine glass stayed full. Her phone stayed in her clutch. About 45 minutes in, I excused myself to take a client call. She nodded without hesitation and kissed my cheek. Her lipstick didn't smudge. It never did. I stepped into the hallway and made my way to the hotel's mezzanine, where I could watch the ballroom through its glass balcony. I needed a moment alone. A moment to breathe and decide if I was imagining all this. Then I saw her. She wasn't at our table anymore. I scanned the room, but she was gone. My eyes flicked to the back, the side exit doors near the service hallway. One of them was still swinging slightly on its hinges. I followed it. The hallway was quieter, dimmer. I passed a couple of staffers carrying trays and nodded politely. At the end of the corridor, I saw a polished wood door marked VIP Lounge. Private access only. It was cracked open. I didn't think. I pushed it gently, just enough to see inside. And there she was, Lauren, my wife, sitting across from a man in a tailored navy suit. Their heads were close together, almost touching. Her hand, manicured and relaxed, rested lightly on his. She wasn't smiling in the way she smiled at guests. No, this was something else. This was softer, familiar. like watching a scene from a movie I wasn't supposed to see. I couldn't move, because I recognized the man. Seth Harper. Of course it was Seth. We had gone to college together. He had been at our wedding. A photographer, turned entrepreneur. Ran some flashy studio in Midtown now. Lauren had mentioned him once. Seth's consulting on our brand refresh, she had said offhandedly a few months ago. Just temporary. I remembered feeling a weird tug in my chest when she said it, but I'd let it go. He was just a colleague, she said. I watched for another few seconds, frozen. Seth leaned in, said something low. She laughed. Not loudly, not nervously. Warmly. And mately. And she touched her hair the way she always did when she was flirting, or nervous, or both. She hadn't noticed me. I turned and walked back down the hallway, heartbeat hammering in my ears. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. And for the first time since this whole thing began, there was no ambiguity left. No plausible deniability. No space for excuses. This was what betrayal looked like in real time. Not loud or messy, but quiet, private, polished. I returned to the ballroom and sat at our table, feeling every tick of the second hand on my watch. 10 minutes later, Lauren returned, smiling, composed. Sorry, she said, brushing a hand against my shoulder. Got caught up with one of the sponsors. I nodded. All good. She didn't notice the way I looked at her, because she wasn't looking for it. The rest of the evening moved quickly after that. I shook more hands. She gave a toast. Someone took a photo of us together. I smiled for the camera, held her waist, let her lean into me like everything was normal. But in my mind, something had changed forever. And for the first time since finding that cufflink, I wasn't searching for answers anymore. I had found them. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning. I played my part. The attentive husband, the amused plus one, the man too absorbed in work and wine to notice his wife slipping out of the ballroom with another man. That's how it had to be. If I had said anything then, I knew exactly how it would go. She'd deny. She'd pivot. She'd cry, maybe. Or worse, she'd minimize it. Tell me I was overreacting, reading too much into something innocent. She'd throw out phrases like, emotional affair, or just a connection, and say she was sorry but confused. I didn't want her confusion. I wanted the truth. So I said nothing, and I started watching everything. The drive back from Savannah was quiet, but not uncomfortable. She put on music. I drove. She talked about how successful the event was, how the VP from Boston finally noticed her work, how she might be up for something big next quarter. I nodded, asked the right questions, even threw in a joke about how I should wear tuxedos more often. She laughed, reached over, and touched my arm. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. But inside, I felt the cold, clear shift that comes when something breaks clean. That night, when she went to bed early, claiming she had a long Monday ahead, I stayed up, and I started planning. The first thing I did was retrieve the cufflink. It was still in my drawer, tucked in a small jewelry box beside my old college ring. I held it up, turned it over, and took a photo. Then I did a reverse image search, cross-referencing styles and designers. 10 minutes later, I found the exact match, custom, from a boutique studio in Charleston. Limited run. Expensive. It was a match to a pair owned by, surprise, Seth Harper. I remembered seeing them in one of his Instagram posts. Not that he posted much publicly anymore, his account had gone mostly dark in the past few months, transitioning from artsy black and white portraits to vague, inspirational posts about creativity and authentic storytelling. The irony. His website listed his studio location. His name was still attached to a couple of brand deals. I took note. Everything went into a folder on my desktop titled Research. It was bland enough to avoid suspicion. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the game. Lauren went to work, came home late, took showers right away, answered texts quickly and smiled too often at her phone. She still made dinner sometimes, still kissed me goodbye, still called me babe, and I said nothing. Instead, I started collecting. First, her cloud backup. Lauren wasn't tech savvy, she used the same Apple ID for her phone, laptop, and iPad. Once I remembered her old password, it took 5 minutes to reset it and gain access to her iCloud. From there, I recovered deleted photos, exported message threads, and downloaded every calendar entry she'd marked private. She hadn't even bothered to turn off syncing. Then came the emails. She kept 2 accounts, one personal, one business. Both were accessible through her MacBook. I logged in one night while she was asleep, claiming jet lag and a late project. I opened her inbox. Hundreds of emails, mostly mundane. But then, nestled in a thread labeled SH Project Notes, I found what I needed. The project wasn't work. It was them. Flotation at first. Quick comments about missing our talks and the way you see me. Then it got personal. Dates planned. Hotel confirmations. A shared album filled with blurry photos from bars, rooftops, quiet corners of rooms with curtains drawn. One picture stopped me cold. It was Lauren, taken from behind in our kitchen, wearing the sweater I'd bought her last Christmas, leaning over the counter, smiling. The caption from Seth, "God, I love this view." I didn't cry. I just kept scrolling. There were voice memos too. I didn't listen to most of them. I didn't need to. Just seeing the timestamps, some sent while I was sitting across from her at dinner, was enough. I copied everything. **, TS, exports, logs. I built a dossier not for lawyers, not for court. For me. For one moment. I wasn't going to argue with her. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or beg for answers she'd already given in every message to him. I wanted to be clear, controlled, and above all done. But before that moment came, I needed to finish one last thing. I reached out to an old contact of mine, Drew, a private security guy I'd worked with on a tech contract years ago. Discreet, efficient, and expensive. I explained the situation. I asked for discreet surveillance, not wiretaps or anything illegal, just photos. Confirmation. One last nail in the coffin. He delivered in less than a week. Photos of Lauren and Seth meeting at his studio after hours. Her car in the back lot. Them walking out together, hands brushing. Once entering the same hotel I had seen them at in Savannah, only this time no event was listed. No reason to be there. I didn't need more. I had what I needed. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. Coming home to her soft greetings, her glass of wine offered without hesitation, the questions about my day. Sometimes she'd reach out, run her fingers through my hair, and say, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" And I'd smile. Yeah, I'd say. Just tired. I don't know if she believed it. Or if she even cared. But what I knew, what I felt in every cell of my body, was that something was ending. Not falling apart, no, that implies chaos. This was surgical. Precise. Every day I added to my collection. A video here, a location tag there. Notes she left on the fridge that contradicted her text timestamps. I began building a timeline, pairing images with calendar events and messages. It read like a novella. Not fiction. Just betrayal dressed up in the polish of corporate life and white wine smiles. I never realized how much silence could prepare you for clarity. I stopped reacting. I stopped fantasizing about catching her, exposing her, blowing everything up in the moment. That wasn't the story I wanted. That would make her the center. No, this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. About choosing the ending rather than being handed one. One night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror for a long time. I barely recognized the man looking back. Not because he looked broken, but because he looked sharp, focused, and ready. Lauren's firm was hosting a major product launch, something about a new platform geared toward community engagement, though I never really got a straight answer about what it actually did. The buzz was big, the guest list even bigger. Media, partners, sponsors. Weeks of planning had gone into it. And Lauren, of course, was at the center. This could be career-changing, she told me 2 nights before the event. Eyes lit up as she typed emails into her phone without looking at me. It's not just a launch. It's a pivot point. I nodded, pretending to be impressed. Sounds like a big night. It is, she said. You'll be there, right? The question caught me off guard. You want me to come? She smiled quickly, almost too quickly. Of course. You're my husband. That word, husband, sounded strange coming from her then. Like a label she'd pulled out of a drawer and dusted off for display. I smiled back and said I'd be there. She didn't know what I had planned. The venue was a high-rise hotel downtown. Modern architecture, all sharp angles and chrome fixtures. The kind of place where everything smelled faintly like money and eucalyptus. Lauren arrived hours early to oversee prep. I stayed back, using the time to make a few final moves. I called in a favor to the AV team hired for the event. It had taken weeks to set up, layers of casual conversations and subtle hints about wanting to show my appreciation to Lauren publicly. They agreed as long as I stayed within the schedule and didn't disrupt the sponsors. I wouldn't be disrupting. I'd be presenting. I arrived about an hour late, dressed in a navy suit and open-collar shirt. Understated but deliberate. Enough to be taken seriously, not so formal that it looked like I was trying too hard. People smiled and nodded as I passed. I was Lauren's husband, the tech guy with a background in startups and clean branding. That was my costume. Inside, the ballroom was already buzzing. Glasses clinked, small talk floated like perfume, and the screens at the front cycled through logos and soft visuals of smiling people using whatever software they were launching. Lauren stood near the center of it all, radiant in a deep emerald dress that shimmered under the lights. She looked powerful, poised. She didn't see me walk in, didn't notice when I moved to the AV booth, didn't flinch when I stepped onto the small platform near the stage during the sponsor appreciation segment. The host, a young woman with a microphone and a rehearsed smile, introduced me as Jonathan Smith, longtime supporter of innovation and one of our key partners. That wasn't technically a lie. I took the mic. Thank you. I began, my voice even. This is an incredible night for Lauren and her team. What they've built here, the network, the platform, the momentum, it's admirable. People clapped politely. Lauren smiled from her table, unsure of where I was going with it. Maybe she thought I was about to toast to her success. Maybe she thought I was making some grand romantic gesture. She didn't know me anymore. I looked out over the audience and took a breath. I've been fortunate to watch some of this unfold up close. And like any good observer, I paid attention. Not just to the product, but to the process. The people. I paused, gave a small smile. And the story behind the story. I tapped the small remote in my pocket. Behind me, the screen changed. Not a logo. Not a slide. A text conversation. Between Lauren and Seth. At first, a few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. A cheeky marketing stunt. But then the words landed. Full sentences. Can't stop thinking about last night. One message read. Another. He has no idea. Followed by a photo of the two of them, pressed close together in a dimly lit hotel room mirror. Her hand on his chest. His arm around her waist. The room fell silent. Dead silent. I could hear glasses being set down. Chairs shifting. Lauren's expression froze. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her body went stiff. Her eyes darted toward the screen. Then to me. Another tap. More photos. Time-stamped. Geotagged. Images of them at his studio. At restaurants. Kissing in parking garages. Every moment carefully, quietly documented. I didn't say anything. I let the images speak. The audience didn't know where to look. Some stared at the screen in disbelief. Others glanced at Lauren, their faces morphing from curiosity to discomfort to pity. A few people stood up quietly, whispering to one another as they made for the exit. Lauren remained seated, motionless. I looked down at her from the stage. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time in months, I saw something real. Not the mask, not the charm, but the raw, naked face of consequence. Transparency, I said into the mic, my voice calm. That's what innovation demands. In business, in life, in relationships. I turned to the AV team and nodded. The screen went black. I stepped down. Nobody stopped me. No one dared. As I passed Lauren's table, I didn't slow. I didn't look back. She didn't follow. Outside, the night was warm. My car was waiting, engine humming, driver silent. As I slid into the back seat, I looked up at the hotel one last time. The lights on the ballroom floor flickered as people began to exit. I wondered how long it would take for the news to travel. How many sponsors would back out? How many colleagues would fall silent? How many bridges would burn? That was her fire to manage now, not mine. I leaned back in the seat as the car pulled away. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. You humiliated her. I stared at it, then deleted it. I had no regrets. She'd been performing a role. I just made sure the audience finally saw the script. I was already gone before sunrise. My bags had been packed for days. I left my wedding ring on the bathroom sink along with a handwritten note that simply said, "You already know why." Then I walked out of our apartment for the last time. By mid-morning, I was airborne. Destination, Seattle. A new role at a mid-sized startup awaited me there, not just a job, but an entire reset. I'd arranged everything behind the scenes, sublet the apartment, sold the car, closed the accounts. My digital life went dark. No more Instagram posts, no more scene receipts. It wasn't revenge. It was erasure. Lauren, meanwhile, faced the aftershock. The footage I shared at the launch event spread quickly. Her professional circle collapsed in slow, brutal motion. Sponsors began pulling out. Investors canceled meetings. Her company, built on public image and pitch decks, began bleeding credibility. No one sent press releases. No one explained. The silence was explanation enough. Seth vanished. Deleted socials, shut down his studio for renovations. I heard through a mutual that he booked a flight to LA the next day, leaving Lauren behind to face what they built in secret. She moved into a rental apartment, one bedroom, furnished, sterile. Gone were the velvet couches and curated bookshelf walls. She kept a low profile. Friends distanced themselves. No statements, no drama. Just cold, clean distance. And in that quiet, she began to understand something she never had to before. It wasn't about the lifestyle. It wasn't even about the scandal. It was about losing the one person who never needed her to be anything other than herself. The one person who had believed in her long before her world looked glossy and successful. And now that person was unreachable. 1 month later, a thick envelope arrived at her new address. No return label. No note. Inside was a collection of documents. Legal transfers. The deed to the house we once shared signed over to a nonprofit foundation for single mothers. I'd arranged it quietly behind closed doors. The house where she had lied, loved, and plotted was no longer hers to remember fondly or regret. And at the bottom of the envelope, a letter. Written in my handwriting. Crisp, deliberate. Lauren. This isn't revenge. This is closure, mine, not yours. You don't owe me an explanation. I've seen it all. Heard it all. And I've accepted it. I forgave you the moment I stopped needing anything from you. That's what forgiveness is, really. Not grace. Not reconciliation. Just freedom. You had my trust. You broke it. That was your choice. I simply chose not to carry it anymore. There's no return path. No middle ground. No secret door that leads back to the life we had. You wanted something different. And now you have it. I won't come back. I won't respond. And I won't forget, not out of bitterness, but because forgetting would mean I didn't matter either. Take care of yourself. Jonathan. There were no signatures needed. The message was the signature. For once, the silence belonged to me. And it was enough.